I want you to imagine something with me right now. Close your eyes if you're in a safe place to do so. Picture yourself 5 years from now. Not the worried version, not the scared version, but the version of you who made it, the one who figured it out, the one who became everything you secretly hoped you could be. Now here's what I need you to understand, and this might sound strange at first, but stay with me because this will change everything you think you know about time itself. That future version of you, the one you just imagined, is not waiting passively in some distant tomorrow, hoping you'll eventually stumble your way there. No, that future self is reaching backward through time right now, in this very moment, trying desperately to guide you, to whisper in your ear, to show you the path. And the tragedy, the absolute heartbreak I've witnessed in thousands of lives, is that most people never learn to hear that voice. They never discover that the future is not just something that happens to you. It's something that speaks to you, calls to you, pulls you forward if only you know how to listen. For decades, I've studied the hidden laws that govern human experience, and I've discovered something that most never realize. Time doesn't just move in one direction, from past to future, like we've been taught. Consciousness can move backwards. Your future can reach into your present and completely rewrite it. I call this the law of time reversal. And once you understand how to use it, you'll never see your life the same way again. You'll realize that you've been living backwards, letting your past dictate your future, when the real power comes from letting your future dictate your present. Think about how you've been living until now. Something happened yesterday, last week, last year, maybe even in your childhood, and you've been carrying it like a weight. You wake up every morning and that past experience tells you who you are. It whispers, this is your limit, this is what you deserve, this is all you'll ever be, and so you move through today creating more of yesterday. You're trapped in a loop, repeating the same patterns, attracting the same situations, becoming a prisoner of what has already happened. This is what I call living forward from the past, and it's the source of almost all human suffering. But I'm going to show you something different today. I'm going to show you how to live backward from the future, how to plant yourself so firmly in the reality you wish to experience that your present moment has no choice but to reorganize itself to match, how to have conversations with the version of yourself who has already achieved what you're seeking, and let that future self become your guide, your teacher, your compass. This isn't fantasy. This isn't positive thinking. This is a precise mental technology that operates according to laws as reliable as gravity. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Joseph, this sounds impossible. Time doesn't work that way. The future hasn't happened yet, so how can it affect me now? And that's exactly the assumption I'm going to dismantle today, because it's that very belief, that limited understanding of time, that's been keeping you stuck. You see, time as you experience it in your waking consciousness is not time as it exists in the deeper dimensions of mind. In your imagination, in your subconscious, time is fluid. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously. And your imagination is not some powerless fantasy realm. It is the creative workshop where your future is being constructed right now, in this moment, whether you're doing it deliberately or accidentally. Let me tell you about a woman who came to me years ago, absolutely devastated. Her name was Margaret, and she'd lost everything in what she called her year of disasters. Her business failed, her marriage ended, her health collapsed, and she sat in my office with tears streaming down her face saying, Joseph, I feel like I'm cursed, like my life is a tragedy that just keeps writing itself chapter after terrible chapter. How do I stop this? How do I change? And I asked her a question that confused her at first. I said, Margaret, who are you talking to when you're alone? She looked at me strangely and said, what do you mean? I said, throughout your day there's a conversation happening in your mind. You're talking to someone, even if you don't realize it. Who is it? Are you talking to your past self, constantly rehashing what went wrong, explaining your failures, justifying your pain? Or are you talking to your future self, the one who made it through this, asking for guidance, listening for wisdom? She sat there in silence for a long moment, and then she whispered, oh my God, I've been having the same conversation with my past for a year. The same argument, the same pain, over and over and over. I'm trapped in it. And right there, in that moment of recognition, her transformation began. Because once you see that you're talking to the wrong version of yourself, once you realize you've been facing backward when you should be facing forward, everything can change. I taught Margaret the practice I'm going to teach you today. the practice of deliberate conversation with your future self, not as escapism, not as denial of your present circumstances, but as the most practical, powerful tool for transformation that exists. Within 3 months, Margaret's entire life had shifted, not because her circumstances magically changed overnight, but because she changed who she was being in relationship to those circumstances. She started making decisions from her future instead of from her past. She started asking, what would the version of me who has overcome this do right now? And that question changed everything. Now, before we go deeper into the practice, I need you to understand why this works. There's a scientific principle here, though I'm going to explain it in simple terms. Your subconscious mind, which is the true creative force in your life, cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you imagine something with emotional intensity and sensory detail, your subconscious accepts it as fact. It begins to reorganize your thoughts, your beliefs, your actions, even your perceptions to align with that imagined reality. But here's where most people get it wrong. They imagine their future desire and then return to their present state of lack, and they wonder why nothing changes. That's not time reversal. That's just daydreaming. Time reversal is when you imagine your desired future so completely, so convincingly, that you actually have a conversation with the version of yourself who lives there. You ask that future self questions. You listen for answers. You feel what it feels like to be that person. You let that future identity reach back and pull your present identity forward. This is not a metaphor. This is not symbolic language. I mean this quite literally. Your consciousness can occupy your future self and speak from that place. And when you do this regularly, with discipline and faith, your present circumstances begin to shift in ways that seem almost miraculous, but are actually the natural operation of a law most people never learn to use. Let me give you another example, and this one might hit closer to home for many of you. I knew a man named Robert who was drowning in debt. 43 years old, 2 jobs, barely keeping his head above water, terrified every time the phone rang that it would be another creditor. He'd tried everything. Budgets, side hustles, positive affirmations about money. Nothing worked. The debt kept growing. The pressure kept building. And the worst part was the identity he'd formed around it. He'd started thinking of himself as a person who's bad with money, as someone who'll always struggle. His past financial mistakes had become his future financial destiny, or so he believed. When Robert found my work, he was skeptical. He said, "Joseph, I've tried all this manifestation stuff. It doesn't work. I need practical solutions, not more wishful thinking." And I told him, "Robert, I agree completely. Wishful thinking is useless. But what I'm offering you isn't wishful thinking. It's a technology of consciousness. And if you're willing to apply it with the same discipline you apply to your 2 jobs, it will work." So I taught Robert to do something specific. Every single night before sleep, which is the most potent time for subconscious programming, I had him close his eyes and step into the version of himself 5 years in the future who was completely financially free. Not just debt-free, but abundant, secure, generous, at peace with money. And I didn't have him just visualize this person. I had him become this person, to sit in that future room, in that future body, with that future bank account, and feel what it feels like to be that man. And then, here's the crucial part, I had him ask that future self a question. How did you get here? What did you do? What choices did you make that I need to make now? And Robert would sit in silence and listen, not for some magical voice from the sky, but for the subtle knowing that arises when you genuinely occupy a different state of consciousness. Sometimes an idea would come, sometimes a feeling, sometimes just a sense of calm certainty about a next step. The first few times Robert did this, he felt ridiculous. He told me, "I'm just making this up. This is my imagination. How is this supposed to help with real debt?" And I said, "Robert, your imagination is the most real thing about you. It's where everything in your life was created before it appeared in your physical world. Your debt was imagined before it was real. Your struggle was imagined before it was experienced, and your freedom must be imagined before it can manifest. The question is not whether you're using your imagination. You're always using it. The question is whether you're using it deliberately or accidentally." Something shifted in Robert when he heard that. He realized he'd been imagining his financial disaster every single day, having conversations with his fearful, failing self, reinforcing the identity of someone who couldn't make it work. He'd been practicing time reversal in the wrong direction, letting his past pull him backward instead of letting his future pull him forward. So he committed to the practice. Every night, without fail, for 6 months, he had that conversation with his future self. And I want to be clear about something. This wasn't magic. Robert still worked his 2 jobs. He still made budgets. He still took practical action. But the actions he took started to be different. Inspired instead of desperate. Creative instead of repetitive. He started noticing opportunities he'd been blind to before. He had an idea for a service he could offer that came directly from one of his nighttime conversations with his future self. Within a year, that side service was earning more than one of his jobs. Within 2 years, he'd paid off 70% of his debt. Within 3 years, he was completely free, earning twice what he'd made before, and more importantly, he'd completely transformed his identity around money. When Robert came back to see me, he said something I'll never forget. He said, "Joseph, the strangest thing happened. About 6 months into the practice, I started to feel like my future self was more real than my current self. Like the financially free Robert was the actual me, and the struggling Robert was just a temporary character I was playing. And once I felt that shift, once my future became more real than my present, everything started to change. It was like the universe itself bent to make my imagination real. And that's exactly what happens when you truly apply the law of time reversal. Your future becomes more real to your subconscious mind than your present. And because your subconscious is the creative force that shapes your experience, it begins to mold your present to match your future. This is not wishful thinking. This is not positive affirmation. This is identity transformation at the deepest level. Now, let me explain something about time that will help you understand why this works. We think of time as linear, as flowing from past to present to future, like a river that only goes one direction. But that's not how time works in consciousness. In consciousness, all time is now. Your past is not behind you in some dusty archive. It's alive in your consciousness right now, in the form of memories, beliefs, and emotional patterns. And your future is not ahead of you in some distant place. It's alive in your consciousness right now, in the form of imagination, possibility, and potential. The question is not whether your past and future are affecting your present. They're always affecting your present. The question is which one you're giving more power to. Are you living from your past, letting old experiences dictate who you are today? Or are you living from your future, letting your vision of who you're becoming dictate who you are today? Most people live from their past without even realizing it. They wake up every morning and pick up the identity they wore yesterday. They think the same thoughts, feel the same feelings, make the same choices. And then they wonder why their life never changes. But when you learn to live from your future, everything shifts. You wake up every morning and pick up the identity of who you're becoming. You think from that place, feel from that place, choose from that place. And your present moment begins to transform because you're no longer creating from past patterns. You're creating from future possibility. Let me share with you one of the most profound experiences I ever had with this principle. It was years ago, during a period of my life when I was facing what seemed like an insurmountable financial challenge. I had obligations coming due, responsibilities I couldn't ignore, and absolutely no visible means to meet them. The old pattern would have been to panic, to obsess over the problem, to lie awake calculating and recalculating figures that simply didn't add up. But I had been practicing this truth about imagination, and I decided to put it to the ultimate test. Every night before sleep, I would enter my inner sanctuary. I would feel the relief, the gratitude, the absolute certainty of having more than enough. I didn't visualize specific amounts or particular solutions. I simply dwelt in the feeling of financial freedom, of abundance flowing naturally into my life. And here's what happened. The solution came from a direction I never could have predicted. An opportunity emerged that my conscious mind would never have considered, never have planned for. It was perfect, elegant, and it resolved everything. But here's the crucial point. It didn't come because I figured it out. It came because I aligned my inner state with the reality I desired. You see, your subconscious mind is connected to an infinite intelligence that knows solutions you cannot conceive. When you try to force outcomes through worry and mental struggle, you actually block the natural flow of creative answers. But when you rest in the feeling of your wish fulfilled, You open channels that your conscious mind doesn't even know exist. This is why I emphasize feeling over mere visualization. Anyone can create mental pictures. But feeling is the secret. Feeling is what impresses the subconscious mind. Feeling is what activates the creative power within you. Think about it this way. When you worry, you feel something, don't you? That tight sensation in your chest, that heaviness in your stomach. Those feelings are real, and they're creating real effects in your life. Worry is actually a very powerful form of creation. It's just creating what you don't want. Now imagine taking that same emotional intensity and directing it toward what you do want. Not in a forced, desperate way, but with calm certainty, with trust, with the peaceful awareness that it is already done in consciousness. And here's what happens when you pray from that elevated consciousness. The universe responds not to your words but to your state. It responds to what you are, not what you say. A person who prays, "Please give me money," while feeling poor will get more poverty. A person who gives thanks for abundance while feeling wealthy inside will magnetize wealth. This is not philosophy. This is spiritual law. Let me share something that transformed my own understanding. Years ago, I met a woman who had been diagnosed with a condition doctors said was irreversible. They gave her medication. They gave her timelines. They gave her limitations. But she refused to accept the verdict of the material world as final. Instead, every night before sleep, she would enter a drowsy, relaxed state and imagine her doctor telling her the condition had completely vanished. She didn't just visualize it. She felt the relief. She heard his astonished voice. She felt herself hugging her family in joy. She did this every single night for weeks, never once allowing doubt to take root during those sacred moments before sleep. 3 months later, she returned to her doctor. He ran the tests again. He looked at the results. He looked at her. He looked back at the results. And he said words she had already heard in her imagination. "I don't understand this. It's completely gone." She smiled. She understood. She had impressed her subconscious mind with a new image, and her subconscious, being the builder of the body, reorganized her cells to match that image. Your subconscious mind controls every function of your body right now. Your heartbeat, your digestion, your breathing, the healing of a cut on your finger, all of this is subconscious. And if your subconscious can heal a wound without your conscious effort, it can heal anything when given the right impression. Now, you might be wondering, what is the right impression? What exactly does the subconscious mind need to hear from you? It needs clarity, it needs feeling, and most importantly, it needs acceptance. Your subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't debate. It doesn't question whether what you're telling it is true or false, possible or impossible. It simply accepts what you impress upon it and begins to work toward making it real in your outer world. This is why affirmations work, but only when done correctly. Most people repeat affirmations mechanically, like parrots, without any emotion, without any belief. They say, "I am healthy," while their mind screams, "No, you're not. Look at your body. Look at your condition." And the subconscious listens to the stronger voice, the voice backed by feeling, by conviction. When you affirm something, you must feel it. You must live in the reality of your words, even if just for a few minutes. You must close your eyes and inhabit the version of yourself that already has what you desire, not as a distant dream, but as a present fact. Let me give you an example. A woman once came to me suffering from severe arthritis. Her hands were gnarled, her joints swollen. She had tried every treatment, every medication. Nothing worked. I told her, "Your subconscious created this condition, and your subconscious can dissolve it." She looked at me with doubt. I said, "Every night before sleep, see yourself using your hands freely. Feel them flexible, strong, pain-free. Don't force it. Just gently imagine it. Thank your subconscious for restoring your hands to perfect health." She did this faithfully. Within 3 months, the swelling reduced. Within 6 months, she could hold a pen, open jars, play with her grandchildren. The doctors called it a miracle. But it wasn't a miracle. It was the law of subconscious acceptance in action. Your subconscious responds to mental images saturated with feeling. It doesn't understand words alone. It understands the language of emotion, of vivid imagination, of faith. Let me tell you about a woman who came to me years ago, drowning in debt. She couldn't sleep at night. The bills piled up on her kitchen table like accusations. Every phone call made her heart race with fear. She had tried affirmations, repeated, "I am wealthy," 1,000 times, but nothing changed. I asked her one question. "When you say those words, what do you feel?" She looked down. "Nothing." Or, "Fear that it's not true." You see, she was working against herself. Her words said one thing, but her emotional conviction said the opposite. She was trying to plant seeds in frozen ground. So we changed the approach entirely. Instead of fighting her current reality with hollow words, we built a new feeling from the inside out. I instructed her to spend 10 minutes each night, just before sleep, in a very specific state of mind. Don't affirm wealth, I told her. Feel the relief. Feel what it's like when the pressure is gone. When you open your mailbox without dread. When you sleep through the night without waking in panic. Build that feeling. Live in it. Make it so real that your body relaxes, that you actually experience the relief in your chest, in your breathing. She did this faithfully. Not with desperation, not with begging, with assumption. She assumed the feeling of her wish fulfilled, and she rested in it. Within 3 weeks, something remarkable happened. An old friend called out of nowhere with a business opportunity. A forgotten tax refund arrived. A skill she'd dismissed as worthless suddenly had market value. The money came, but more importantly, her relationship with money transformed. The anxiety dissolved. She moved through her days with a quiet confidence that itself attracted opportunity. This is what I mean by feeling. Not superficial emotion, not pretending, but the deep, settled knowing that comes when you inhabit the state of your wish fulfilled. Your subconscious mind accepts this feeling as instruction. It begins to rearrange your world to match it. This is why affirmations alone often fail. You can repeat, "I am wealthy," 1,000 times while your heart whispers, "But I'm broke." The subconscious doesn't respond to the words. It responds to the feeling behind them. It responds to conviction. So how do you cultivate this feeling? You practice. You rehearse the state you wish to embody. Before sleep, when your conscious mind softens its grip, you imagine yourself already in possession of your desire, not as a future event but as a present fact. If you seek confidence, you don't pray for confidence to come. You feel yourself confident now. You walk through an imaginary scene where others respond to your quiet certainty. You sense the ease in your chest, the steadiness in your voice. You make it real in imagination first. And here's what most people miss. The feeling doesn't require external proof. You don't need the job offer to feel successful. You don't need the relationship to feel loved. You generate the feeling independently, through imagination, and then the outer world reorganizes itself to reflect it back to you. I've watched people transform their entire lives by mastering this one principle. A woman comes to me drowning in debt, anxiety carved into her face. I don't give her a budget plan. I teach her to feel abundant, to close her eyes and touch the texture of financial peace, to inhabit that state so fully that her nervous system believes it. Within weeks, unexpected checks arrive. Old debts are forgiven. New opportunities surface. Not because she manipulated the universe, but because she stopped broadcasting lack and started broadcasting abundance. She changed the signal, and the reception changed with it. Your feelings are not reactions to your circumstances. They are the cause of your circumstances. This inverts everything you've been taught. You've been trained to wait for the world to give you permission to feel good, to feel successful after you succeed, to feel loved after someone loves you. But creation works in reverse. You feel it first. You claim the state internally. And then, because consciousness is the only reality, the outer world has no choice but to conform. Because that's how the law works. Every single time, without exception. Now, I want to talk to you about something that trips people up more than anything else, and I've seen it destroy manifestations that were already done in consciousness. I'm talking about what I call the watching trap. Here's what happens. You plant the seed, you do your visualization, you enter the state, you feel it real, and then you start watching for evidence. You wake up the next morning and you look around. Is it here yet? Did anything change? Let me check my bank account. Let me check my phone. Let me see if they texted me. and you're constantly scanning your outer world for proof that your imaginal act worked. And every time you do this, every time you look at your current circumstances with anxiety, with doubt, with that desperate energy of, where is it? You're replanting the old seed. You're going back to the consciousness of lack. You're returning to the state of not having it. Listen carefully. The watching is the problem. The questioning is the problem. The checking is the problem. Because all of that comes from a consciousness that doesn't yet possess what it desires. Think about something you already have. Think about your favorite shirt hanging in your closet. Do you wake up every morning and anxiously wonder, is my shirt still there? Did it manifest yet? Of course not. That would be insane. You don't think about it because you know it's there. You're in the state of having that shirt. That's the consciousness you need to maintain with your desire. Not desperate checking, not anxious monitoring, but the calm, natural knowing that it's already done. I'm not saying to ignore your physical world. I'm saying to stop giving it the power to dictate your inner state. You see lack? Fine. You acknowledge it, but you don't accept it as your reality. You turn within. You return to the state. You remind yourself of what you claimed in imagination. Because here's the truth that most people never grasp. The outer world is always showing you your past consciousness. What you see today is the result of who you were being yesterday, last week, last month. It's old news. It's an echo. And here's where most people get trapped. They look at the echo and they let it define what they do next. They see lack, so they think lack thoughts. They see limitation, so they accept limitation as truth. They see problems and they marinate in problem consciousness. But you must understand something profound. The outer world has no power except the power you give it through your reaction to it. The circumstances you see are not the cause, they are the effect. And when you treat an effect as if it's a cause, you perpetuate the very pattern you're trying to escape. Listen carefully. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't analyze whether what you're saying is true or false, good or bad, helpful or harmful. It simply accepts what you consistently impress upon it. It takes your dominant mental attitude, the sum total of your habitual thinking, and reproduces it exactly in your external world. This is why affirmation works. This is why visualization works. Not because they're mystical or magical, but because they're psychological. They're the tools by which you deliberately impress new patterns onto your subconscious mind. When you affirm, I am prosperous, you're not lying to yourself. You're not denying reality. You're impressing a new pattern. You're planting a new seed. And if you persist in that impression with feeling and conviction, your subconscious has no choice but to bring it into manifestation. The feeling is crucial. You cannot just mechanically repeat words and expect transformation. You must feel the reality of what you're affirming. You must enter into the mood, the emotional atmosphere of your desire fulfilled, because your subconscious responds to feeling far more powerfully than to mere words. Think of it like this. Your subconscious is like soil. It will grow whatever seed you plant in it. It doesn't care if you plant roses or weeds, it simply grows what it's given. And the seeds are your thoughts combined with feeling. Thoughts without feeling are like seeds without water. They may lie dormant, but they won't germinate. So when you say, I am healthy, you must simultaneously feel healthy. Enter into the sensation of wellness. Imagine the vitality coursing through your body. Feel gratitude for your perfect health right now, in this moment, even before the physical evidence appears. This is where so many stumble. They wait for the healing before they feel grateful. They wait for the evidence before they believe. But the creative process works in reverse. Your feeling of gratitude now creates the healing you will experience tomorrow. A woman once wrote to me about her daughter who had been diagnosed with a severe blood disorder. The doctors had given a grim prognosis, but this mother understood the principle. Every night she would sit quietly and imagine her daughter radiant with health, playing in the garden, laughing with abandon. She didn't beg. She didn't plead with God to change what was. Instead, she gave thanks for the healing that already existed in spiritual reality. She would say, "Thank you that my daughter is whole and perfect right now. Thank you that divine life flows through every cell of her body." She maintained this inner conviction despite all outer appearances. Within 3 months, the doctors were baffled. The blood disorder had completely reversed itself. They called it spontaneous remission. But there was nothing spontaneous about it. It was the natural outworking of a spiritual law, set into motion by a mother's unwavering faith. You see, Your subconscious mind does not distinguish between a real experience and one vividly imagined. When you enter into the feeling of your wish fulfilled, when you live from that end result emotionally and mentally, your subconscious accepts it as fact. And once accepted, it must express itself in your physical world. This is not fantasy. This is not positive thinking divorced from reality. This is engaging with a deeper reality, the spiritual blueprint that precedes all physical manifestation. Everything you see in the material world first existed as thought, as consciousness, as mental imagery. When ancient builders constructed a cathedral, it first existed complete and perfect in their minds. When inventors create breakthrough technologies, they see them functioning in their imagination before a single prototype is built. When artists paint masterpieces, the vision appears internally before the brush ever touches canvas. This is the creative process of the universe itself, operating through human consciousness. You are doing the same thing when you build your mental image of health. You are not pretending something false. You are connecting with the pattern, the template, the divine design that exists in a dimension prior to physical form. Your subconscious mind, which governs all your bodily functions, responds to this pattern. It begins to reorganize, restructure, and rebuild according to the blueprint you've provided through your imagination. I've witnessed people with supposedly incurable conditions create such vivid, sustained mental images of perfect health that their bodies underwent transformations medical professionals called miraculous. But there was no miracle in the supernatural sense. There was simply the natural law of mind in operation, the law that states consciousness creates conditions. Your body is renewing itself constantly. Science tells us that most cells in your body replace themselves regularly. You are literally creating a new body continuously. The question is, what instructions are you giving to this creative process? Are you instructing it through worry, through fearful images of disease and decline? Or are you directing it through calm, confident visualization of vitality and strength? Consider how your body responds to your thoughts in obvious ways. Think of something embarrassing and you blush. Think of something fearful and your heart races, your palms sweat. Think of biting into a lemon and your mouth waters. These are not mystical phenomena. They are demonstrations of the mind-body connection that everyone experiences daily. If your thoughts can produce such immediate physical responses, imagine what sustained, disciplined, purposeful thinking can accomplish. When you dedicate yourself to the practice of seeing yourself healthy, of feeling the reality of wellness in your imagination, you are not engaging in fantasy. You are engaging in the most practical, results-oriented activity possible. You are working with the most fundamental principle of existence, that consciousness is the only creative power. Everything else, every medicine, every treatment, every external intervention is secondary to this primary law. They work only to the degree that your subconscious mind accepts them as beneficial. I've witnessed countless individuals who underwent the same medical procedures with radically different outcomes. What made the difference? Not the skill of the surgeon, though that certainly played a role. The decisive factor was always the mental attitude of the patient. Those who believed deeply in their recovery, who could see themselves whole and well, who felt gratitude for their healing even before it manifested, these individuals recovered with remarkable speed. Those who harbored doubt, who spoke constantly of their condition, who imagined worst-case scenarios, they struggled, despite receiving identical medical care. This is why I emphasize so strongly the importance of your inner conversation. Listen to yourself. What are you saying about your body when you talk to others? What are you saying to yourself in those quiet moments before sleep? Are you rehearsing your symptoms? Are you giving detailed descriptions of your pain to everyone who will listen? Every time you do this, you are impressing your subconscious mind with the very condition you wish to eliminate. I knew a woman who came to me with chronic migraines that had plagued her for 15 years. She had seen dozens of specialists, tried every medication available, kept detailed journals of her symptoms. She could tell you exactly how many migraines she'd had each month, what triggered them, how long they lasted. She had become, in essence, an expert on her own suffering. Her identity had become wrapped up in her condition. When people asked how she was, she would launch into lengthy descriptions of her latest migraine episode. But here's what Maria didn't realize. Every time she told that story, she was recreating the condition in her subconscious mind. Every detailed description of her pain was an affirmation. Every conversation about her migraines was a prayer to her subconscious, asking it to keep producing the same result. You see, Your subconscious doesn't judge whether something is good or bad for you. It simply accepts what you persistently impress upon it. When you constantly talk about your illness, when you identify yourself as a sick person, when you research every symptom and connect with every aspect of your condition, you are giving your subconscious mind very clear instructions. This is who I am. Keep this going. Maria's turning point came during one of our sessions when I asked her a simple question. If you woke up tomorrow completely healed, who would you be? What would you talk about? She looked at me, confused. Then tears filled her eyes. I don't know, she whispered. I honestly don't know who I'd be without this problem. That moment of recognition was the beginning of her transformation. She realized that she had been investing more mental energy in being sick than in being well. Her entire identity, her conversations, her daily focus, everything revolved around her condition. I gave her a new practice. Instead of researching migraines, she would spend that same time visualizing herself healthy, active, and vibrant. Instead of describing her symptoms to friends, she would talk about her goals and interests. Instead of identifying as a migraine sufferer, she began to see herself as a woman reclaiming her health. The changes didn't happen overnight, but they happened. Within 3 months, her migraines had decreased by half. Within 6 months, they were rare occurrences. Within a year, they had virtually disappeared. What changed? Not her medical condition first, but her mental condition. She stopped feeding the problem with her attention and began nourishing the solution instead. She began to dwell mentally in the reality of health, not as a distant hope but as a present fact in her mind. And you see, this is what most people miss entirely. They think positive thinking means slapping a smile on your face while secretly terrified inside. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is a genuine shift in your inner dwelling place. The woman didn't just think about health, she lived in it mentally. She felt the relief. She imagined herself walking freely. She saw herself sleeping peacefully through the night. And she did this not once, not twice, but persistently until it became more real to her than the pain itself. Now, let me ask you something. Where do you dwell? Not physically, I mean mentally. Where does your mind go when you're alone with your thoughts? Do you dwell in your debts or in your prosperity? Do you live mentally in your illness or in your vitality? Because wherever you mentally dwell, that becomes your address in reality. Your subconscious doesn't care if something has happened yet or not. It only cares what you're consistently impressing upon it. And here's what's truly remarkable. When you change what you're mentally dwelling in, when you actually shift your inner residence from problem to solution, the subconscious immediately begins to manifest that new dwelling place in your external world. The woman with arthritis discovered this truth. Within weeks, the inflammation began to subside. Within months, she was walking without assistance. The doctors called it spontaneous remission, but you and I know better. There was nothing spontaneous about it. It was law, mental law in action. And this same principle applies to every condition in your life. Are you dwelling in lack? Then lack will be your experience. Are you mentally living in rejection, in failure, in limitation? Then that's what must appear in your world. Not because life is punishing you, but because you are creating from the inside out. But the moment you change your inner dwelling place, the moment you begin to live mentally in the state of your wish fulfilled, everything must change. It has to. It's law. The universe doesn't negotiate. It doesn't weigh your worthiness. It simply responds. Like a mirror that reflects your face without judgment, without delay, the subconscious mind reflects your habitual mental state without questioning whether you deserve it. I've watched this principle work in the most unexpected circumstances. A man came to me once, broken by business failure. His company had collapsed. His reputation was in ruins. Every door seemed closed, and he sat in my office with tears streaming down his face, convinced he was finished. But here's what changed everything for him. I asked him a simple question. If you could live anywhere mentally, where would you choose to live? He looked at me confused. So I explained. Right now you're dwelling in the house of failure. Every thought is a room filled with loss. Every feeling is furniture arranged around defeat. But you can move. You can change your inner address. He began to practice something radical. Every night before sleep, he would enter into the feeling of being a successful businessman again, not by denying what had happened, not by pretending, but by occupying the mental state of someone whose circumstances were completely different. He felt the satisfaction, the confidence, the ease. He rehearsed conversations from that state. He imagined looking at bank statements from that state. Within 6 months, opportunities appeared that seemed impossible. A former competitor offered a partnership. An investor he'd never met sought him out. The comeback wasn't just external, it was an exact reflection of his inner relocation. You see, most people wait for their circumstances to change before they change their inner dwelling. They say, when I have the money, then I'll feel abundant. When I find love, then I'll feel loved. When I get the recognition, then I'll feel worthy. But this is backwards. It's trying to live from the outside in. The law works from the inside out, always. First the inner shift, then the outer reflection. First the feeling, then the evidence. First the state, then the circumstance. And this, my friend, is where most people abandon their dreams. They see the external world unchanged, and they conclude that their imagination was powerless. They look at their bank account still showing the same figures and they say, see, this doesn't work. They glance at the empty chair across the dinner table and they whisper, I knew I'd always be alone. But you must understand something fundamental about the creative process. When you plant a seed in the ground, do you dig it up the next morning to check if it's growing? Do you stand over it, criticizing it for not being a full-grown tree by sunset? Of course not. You water it, you give it sunlight, you trust the invisible process happening beneath the surface. Your imagination works the same way. There is always a gap between the planting and the harvest. Always. This gap is not evidence of failure. It is evidence that natural law is at work. I recall a woman who came to me, desperate and defeated. She had been imagining financial abundance for 2 weeks, she said, and nothing had changed. Nothing? I asked her. Tell me about your days. And as she spoke, the evidence emerged. A former colleague had called out of the blue. She'd stumbled upon a book about investing. Her neighbor mentioned a job opening. But she had dismissed all of these as coincidences, as meaningless noise, because they weren't the final results she demanded. Do you see? The bridge was being built, plank by plank, but she was looking for the completed structure. The universe does not materialize your desire out of thin air. It orchestrates circumstances. It arranges meetings. It places books in your path, ideas in your mind, impulses in your heart. These are not accidents. These are the very means by which your assumption is hardening into fact. Your job is not to see the full staircase. Your job is to take the first step that appears, and then the next one. Trust that each step is leading you exactly where you have decided to go. The doubters will come. They always do. When you begin to speak about your new vision, when you start acting as if your success is already real, some people will laugh. They'll call you delusional. They'll remind you of your past failures as if those failures define your future. Listen carefully. Their doubt is not evidence. It's merely a reflection of their own limitations. When the Wright brothers talked about human flight, people called them insane. When Florence Nightingale insisted on reforming hospital care, she was ridiculed by the medical establishment. When Walt Disney mortgaged everything for a theme park, bankers thought he'd lost his mind. These pioneers didn't fail because they ignored the doubters. They succeeded because they understood a fundamental truth. The opinion of someone who has never built what you're building is worthless intelligence. You don't need permission from people who are living small lives to live a large one. You don't need validation from those who gave up on their dreams to pursue yours. Their fear is their business. Your faith is yours. But here's what you must understand about criticism and doubt: it will test the authenticity of your belief. If someone's negative comment can derail your entire vision, then you never truly believed it in the first place. You were hoping, wishing, fantasizing. Real faith is unmoved by opposition. It doesn't argue. It doesn't defend. It simply continues building. I've watched thousands of people abandon their dreams at the first sign of criticism. They take a negative comment as confirmation of their secret fears. They use someone else's doubt as an excuse to quit. And then they spend years wondering what might have been. Don't be that person. When doubt comes, whether from others or from your own mind, recognize it as a test. It's asking, how committed are you really? Your job is to answer that question not with words, but with continued action. Keep affirming, keep visualizing, keep taking the steps that appear before you. Let your persistence be your response to every doubter, including the one inside your own head. Because here's what happens when you refuse to quit. Eventually, reality begins to shift. The doors that were closed start opening. The people you need begin appearing. The resources you require start flowing toward you, not because you forced anything, but because you remained faithful to the vision until the subconscious had no choice but to manifest it. This is the principle behind every great achievement in human history. Edison did not see the light bulb on his first attempt, or his 100th, but he impressed upon his subconscious mind the absolute conviction that it was already done. Each so-called failure was simply feedback, an adjustment, a refinement. His faith never wavered because he understood what most people miss. The subconscious does not recognize time the way the conscious mind does. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You water it, you give it sunlight, you trust the process. The same applies to your mental seed. Once you've planted your desire in the subconscious through feeling and repetition, your job is not to worry, doubt, or constantly verify. Your job is to maintain the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Let me give you a modern example. I once counseled a young woman who wanted to start her own business but had no capital, no connections, and no experience in entrepreneurship. Everything in her external world said, impossible. But she began to practice this technique nightly. She would sit quietly, close her eyes, and imagine herself walking into her own storefront. She felt the texture of the doorknob. She heard the bell chime as customers entered. She saw herself helping people, laughing with her team, depositing checks at the bank. For 3 months, nothing visible changed. Her bank account remained the same. No investors appeared. But she persisted. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, a former colleague reached out about a business opportunity. A week later, she attended a family gathering and mentioned her dream to an uncle she rarely spoke with. He offered to invest. Within 6 months, she opened her doors. Now, the untrained mind looks at this and calls it luck, coincidence, good timing, but you know better now. Those events were not random. They were magnetized into her experience by the sustained emotional conviction impressed upon her subconscious mind. The universe rearranged itself to match her inner state. This is not magic. This is law. The law of consciousness. What you are conscious of, you experience. Not what you wish for casually, not what you hope might happen, but what you are inwardly convinced is already true. And here's the beautiful part. The subconscious mind does not argue. It does not debate. It does not say, but you're not qualified, or, but you don't deserve this, or, but people like you don't achieve that. It simply accepts the impression you give it and goes to work. The subconscious mind is like a faithful servant who never questions your orders. If you tell it, I am confident, it says, yes, master. Confidence, it is. If you tell it, I am afraid, it says with equal enthusiasm, yes, master, fear it is. It makes no moral judgments. It has no opinions about what you should or shouldn't be. It simply receives the mental blueprint you hand it and begins construction immediately. This is why the words you speak to yourself matter so profoundly. Every I am statement is a command to your subconscious mind. When you say, I am tired, you are instructing your deeper mind to produce the feeling of fatigue. When you say, I am healthy and strong, you are commanding it to manifest vitality. The subconscious doesn't care which instruction you give it. It treats both with equal seriousness and begins the process of making your declaration real. I've watched people transform their entire health simply by changing what they declared about themselves. A woman once came to me suffering from chronic exhaustion. She had been to doctors who could find nothing physically wrong, yet she dragged herself through each day feeling depleted. When I asked her what she told herself about her energy levels, she said without hesitation, I'm always tired. I just don't have energy like other people. There it was. She had been programming her subconscious mind with the belief of exhaustion for so long that her body had no choice but to comply. I taught her to reverse the programming. Every morning and every night, she would declare with feeling, I am filled with boundless energy. Vitality flows through every cell of my body. I am strong, refreshed, and alive. Within 3 weeks, her energy had completely transformed. Not because some external circumstance changed, not because she took a magic pill, but because she stopped commanding her subconscious mind to produce exhaustion and started commanding it to produce vitality. Your subconscious mind is working right now, this very moment, to manifest whatever you've been habitually declaring and feeling. If you've been declaring limitation, it's creating experiences that match limitation. If you've been declaring abundance, it's orchestrating circumstances that reflect abundance. It doesn't play favorites. It doesn't have moods. It simply says yes to whatever dominant mental attitude you maintain. Whether you approach it with fear or faith, it responds equally. This is why Jesus spoke so often about belief. According to your faith be it done unto you, not according to your wishes, not according to your hopes, according to your faith, your deep, sustained conviction. Now, I want to address something that troubles many people. They say, "But Joseph, I've tried affirmations, I've repeated positive statements, nothing changed." And here's what I tell them: your conscious words mean nothing if your subconscious feeling contradicts them. You can say "I am wealthy" 1,000 times, but if, while saying it, you times feel times poor, anxious, or doubtful, if there's a knot in your stomach, a tightness in your chest, then you're impressing poverty consciousness, not prosperity consciousness. The subconscious responds to feeling tones, not syllables. This is why I always emphasize the times feeling times of the wish fulfilled. When you pray, when you affirm, when you visualize, you must generate the emotional state that would be natural if your desire were already accomplished. If you were truly wealthy, how would you feel walking down the street? Relaxed, confident, generous? Then cultivate times that feeling times now. Wear it like a garment. Live in it. The subconscious doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. It accepts the dominant impression. Let me give you a practical example. A woman once came to me, desperate for employment. She'd been rejected from dozens of positions. Her confidence was shattered. I said, "Tonight, before sleep, imagine a friend congratulating you on your new job. Hear their voice, feel their handshake, feel the relief and joy in your chest. Make it real in your imagination." She did this faithfully for 9 nights. On the 10th day, she received a call for a position she'd almost forgotten applying for. The interview felt effortless. She was hired immediately. What happened? She stopped trying to make something happen. She stopped radiating desperation. Instead, she impressed her subconscious with the feeling of already being employed, and her subconscious, connected to infinite intelligence, arranged circumstances to match that impression. This isn't luck, this is law. But now comes the part that most people miss, the part that turns casual interest into complete transformation. You have to protect the impression you've created. Your subconscious doesn't discriminate. It doesn't judge whether an impression is good or bad, true or false, healthy or destructive. It simply accepts what you impress upon it with feeling and repetition. This means that every time you worry, every time you doubt, every time you imagine the worst, you're making a fresh impression, and your subconscious will work just as faithfully to manifest times as it would your desire. I've seen this pattern play out countless times. Someone impresses their mind with a wonderful goal. They feel it, they believe it, they're excited. Then they tell the wrong person about it. That person says, "Are you sure? That sounds risky. What if it doesn't work out?" And suddenly the impression begins to fade. Doubt creeps in, fear replaces faith, and the entire inner structure they'd built starts to crumble. This is why the mystics spoke of guarding your treasures. Not because success should be secret, but because your inner world is sacred. It must be protected until the outer manifestation is complete. Think of it like planting a seed. You wouldn't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You wouldn't let someone stomp on the soil. You'd water it, give it sunlight, and trust the process. Your mental impressions require the same care. When you've impressed your subconscious with a clear desire, you must then refuse to entertain contradictory thoughts. You must gently, persistently, return to the feeling of your wish fulfilled. When doubt arises, and it will, don't fight it. Fighting gives it energy. Simply recognize it as a habit of the old consciousness, and turn your attention back to your desired state. This is discipline, not the harsh, punishing kind, but the loving, consistent kind. The kind that says, "I choose this thought over that one. I choose this feeling over that one." Over time, this discipline becomes second nature. The new impression becomes dominant. and your subconscious begins to work automatically, effortlessly, in the direction of your desire. Let me give you a real-world example. A woman came to me once struggling with financial lack. She had tried affirmations, visualizations, vision boards, all the usual methods, and yet nothing changed. Her bank account remained empty. Her bills piled up. Her anxiety grew. I asked her a simple question. What do you feel when you say your affirmations? She paused. Then she admitted, I feel like I'm lying to myself. There it was, the truth beneath the words. Her affirmations were correct. Her intentions were sincere, but her feeling was rooted in doubt, in fear, in the very lack she was trying to overcome. So we changed the approach entirely. Instead of affirming what she didn't yet have, I asked her to recall a time when she felt financially secure. Not rich, not abundant, just secure, just safe. She remembered a moment years earlier, before her difficulties began. A moment when her rent was paid, her fridge was full, and she went to bed without a single worry about money. I said, go back to that moment. Not in your mind, in your feeling. Feel the relief. Feel the peace. Feel the gratitude for having enough. She closed her eyes, and within moments, her breathing changed. Her shoulders relaxed. A soft smile appeared on her face. That's the feeling, I said. That is your seed. I instructed her to return to that feeling every night before sleep, not to think about money, not to visualize checks or bills being paid, just to rest in that feeling of security and peace. She did this faithfully for 3 weeks. And then, something shifted. A former employer reached out with a freelance opportunity. A forgotten refund check arrived in the mail. A friend repaid a loan she had written off years ago. None of these things were miraculous in themselves, but together, they were more than coincidence. They were the subconscious mind rearranging circumstances, drawing to her the very security she had impressed upon it. Within 2 months, her financial situation had completely turned around. Not because she worked harder, not because she got lucky, but because she changed the feeling from which she was operating. She stopped planting seeds of lack and fear. She began planting seeds of security and peace. And the subconscious, ever faithful, brought forth a harvest that matched the seed. This is the essence of all mental and spiritual work. You are not trying to force the universe to give you something. You are aligning your inner feeling with the reality you wish to experience. And once that alignment is established, the outer world has no choice but to reflect it. Now, I want you to consider this carefully. Most people wait for the evidence before they believe. They say, when I see it, I'll believe it. When I have the money in my hand, then I'll feel wealthy. When I meet the right person, then I'll feel loved. When I get the promotion, then I'll feel successful. But this is the reversal of the law. This is spiritual ignorance. You are trying to change the reflection without changing the image. You are standing before the mirror of life with a frown, demanding that it smile first. It doesn't work that way. It cannot work that way. The law is exact and it is unchangeable. You must feel it first. You must assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled before the evidence appears. You must believe it before you see it. This is what faith really means. Not blind hope, not wishful thinking, but the inner conviction, the feeling, the assumption that what you desire is already yours. You appropriate it in consciousness first, and then the manifestation follows. I remember a man who came to me, burdened with debt, terrified of bankruptcy. He said, Dr. Murphy, I cannot sleep at night. I'm drowning. How can I feel wealthy when I'm about to lose everything? I told him, you must reverse the feeling. Every night before sleep, instead of rehearsing your debts, you will assume the feeling of financial freedom. You will feel the relief, the peace, the gratitude of having more than enough. You will imagine your bank account filled, your obligations met, your mind at ease. He protested, but that's a lie. That's not the truth. I said, which truth? The truth of your present circumstances, which you helped create with your former thinking, or the truth of the law, which says that what you assume to be true will become your experience? You must choose. He chose, he practiced faithfully. Every night, he entered into the feeling of financial freedom. He didn't deny his present situation during the day, but he refused to give it power in his imagination. He lived from the end. Within 4 months, unexpected opportunities appeared, a new position, a forgotten investment that matured, a debt forgiven. The exact sequence of events doesn't matter. What matters is that his outer world rearranged itself to match his inner assumption. Your assumption becomes the invisible hand that rearranges circumstances. People change their minds. Checks arrive in the mail. Opportunities that were closed suddenly open. And you won't always understand the mechanics of how it happened. You don't need to understand it. You just need to persist in the assumption that it is done. Now, let me address something that trips people up constantly. They say, "Joseph, I've been visualizing for weeks, and nothing has changed. I still see the same bills, the same problems, the same obstacles." Here's what's really happening. You're living in the interval between planting the seed and harvesting the crop. And during that interval, you're looking at the soil saying, "Where's my wheat? I don't see any wheat. This doesn't work." The seed is germinating beneath the surface. Roots are forming. Connections are being made in ways you cannot yet perceive. But if you dig up the seed every day to check if it's growing, you'll kill it before it has a chance to sprout. Your job is to water it with faith, to tend it with assumption, to protect it from the weeds of doubt and fear. And then, when you least expect it, the first green shoot will break through the surface. The manifestation will appear. The thing you claimed in imagination will present itself in your world. I've watched this happen thousands of times. A woman assumes she is happily married. For months, there's no sign of a relationship. Then suddenly she meets someone at a wedding. 3 months later, they're engaged. She tells me, "It happened so fast." But it didn't happen fast. It was germinating the entire time she held her assumption. A man assumes he is financially free. He maintains that feeling for 6 weeks. Nothing visible changes. Then his employer restructures the company. He's offered a position he didn't even know existed, with double his previous salary. "It came out of nowhere," he says. But it didn't come from nowhere. It came from his assumption. He assumed the worst. He expected conflict. He rehearsed negative outcomes in his mind, and his subconscious, which cannot reject any assumption you persistently hold, delivered exactly what he ordered. This is why assumption is the most powerful force in your psychological world. It doesn't matter what you want. It doesn't matter what you say you desire. What matters is what you actually assume to be true about yourself, about others, about life itself. Your assumptions are silent commands. They work underground, beneath the surface of your conscious awareness. They shape your perceptions, guide your reactions, and magnetize corresponding circumstances into your experience. Let me give you another example. A woman came to me convinced she was unlucky with money. "Dr. Murphy," she said, "I just can't seem to get ahead. Every time I save a little, something happens and the money disappears. I must be cursed." I asked her to describe her relationship with money, and as she spoke, her assumption became crystal clear. She repeatedly said things like, "Money never stays with me. I'm just not the type who has financial security. Rich people are different from me." These weren't casual observations. These were her core assumptions about herself and money, and those assumptions were instructions to her subconscious mind. I explained to her that her subconscious doesn't argue with her self-concept. If she assumes she's the kind of person who cannot hold on to money, her subconscious will arrange circumstances to validate that assumption. It will guide her toward unnecessary expenses, create emergencies, blur her judgment about purchases, all to maintain consistency with her dominant assumption. The solution wasn't to work harder or earn more. The solution was to change her assumption. We began with a simple but profound shift. She started assuming she was the kind of person money stayed with. She imagined her bank account growing. She felt the security of financial stability. She repeated, "I am a magnet for prosperity. Money comes to me easily and stays with me happily." Within months, her entire financial situation transformed. Not because she won the lottery or received an inheritance, but because her new assumption guided her to better decisions, opened her eyes to opportunities she'd been blind to, and changed her emotional relationship with money itself. Your assumptions are prophecies. They predict your future not because they see what's coming, but because they create what's coming. The universe doesn't judge your assumptions as positive or negative. It simply accepts them as instructions. When you assume, "I'm always struggling," the universe says, "Your wish is my command." and arranges circumstances to match that assumption. When you assume, I am prosperous and abundant, the universe responds identically. It arranges circumstances to match that new assumption. This is why affirmations without feeling accomplish nothing. You can repeat, I am wealthy, 10,000 times, but if your underlying assumption remains, I never have enough, your deeper assumption will always win. The subconscious doesn't respond to words. It responds to conviction, to the feeling tone beneath the words. I've watched people sabotage their own success repeatedly because their assumption of unworthiness was stronger than their desire for achievement. They'd get the promotion, then unconsciously create problems that led to their dismissal. They'd attract the relationship, then behave in ways that guaranteed its failure. Not because they wanted to fail, but because success contradicted their core assumption about themselves. Your current circumstances are absolutely saturated with evidence of your past assumptions. Look around your life right now. Your relationships, your bank account, your health, your career, each one is a perfect mirror reflecting back the assumptions you've been carrying, often unconsciously, for years. But here's the liberating truth. The moment you change your assumption, you begin creating new circumstances. Not instantly, perhaps, but inevitably. A seed doesn't become a tree overnight, but the moment it's planted, the process has begun. Nothing can stop it except digging it up. So examine your assumptions ruthlessly. When you say, I can't afford that, you're not stating a fact, you're declaring an assumption that perpetuates lack. When you say, I'm not the kind of person who succeeds at this, you're not being realistic, you're imprisoning yourself with a false assumption. Your assumptions about yourself, about others, about what's possible, about how the world works, these are the invisible prison bars that constrain your life. And here's what makes assumptions so insidious. They perpetuate themselves through selective perception. When you assume you're unlucky, you notice every setback and overlook every opportunity. When you assume people are untrustworthy, you interpret neutral actions as hostile and miss genuine offers of friendship. I once counseled a man who assumed that success required sacrifice, that you couldn't have both professional achievement and family happiness. This assumption was so deeply embedded that he didn't even recognize it as an assumption. He thought it was just how life worked. And so he climbed the corporate ladder while his marriage crumbled, believing this was the inevitable price of success. Only when I challenged him to examine this assumption did he realize it was false. Plenty of people had both. His assumption had created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because he believed he had to choose, he acted in ways that forced that choice. The beautiful truth is that you can change any assumption at any time. You don't need permission. You don't need proof. You simply decide to adopt a new assumption and persist in it until your subconscious accepts it as true. Assume you are healthy, and your body responds. Assume you are prosperous, and opportunities appear. Assume you are loved, and relationships transform. Start this practice today. Write down 3 limiting assumptions you've been carrying. Perhaps, I'm too old to start something new, or money doesn't come easily to me, or I'm not creative. Now deliberately replace each one with an empowering assumption. I have valuable experience that gives me unique advantages. Money flows to me easily and naturally. I am creative and resourceful in solving problems. Then, and this is crucial, act as if these new assumptions were already true. Don't wait for evidence. The evidence comes after you change the assumption, not before. This is the leap of faith that activates the law. Your new assumptions, impressed upon your subconscious through repetition and feeling, become the new foundation from which your life unfolds. Many people sabotage themselves at this critical juncture. They change their assumption for a day or two, maybe even a week, but because they don't see immediate external confirmation, they abandon the new state and revert to their old patterns. This is like planting a seed and digging it up every few days to check if it's growing. You kill the very thing you're trying to nurture. The subconscious mind needs time to reorganize your entire experiential world according to your new assumptions. It's working beneath the surface, rearranging circumstances, orchestrating meetings, dissolving obstacles, creating opportunities. But this inner work happens in its own time, according to laws you don't consciously control. Your job is simply to remain faithful to the assumption, to live from it consistently, to return to it every time doubt creeps in. This is what I mean by persistence in assumption. Not aggressive effort, but gentle, consistent return to the desired state. Think of it like tuning a radio. You don't force the station to come through. You simply adjust the dial to the right frequency and maintain that position. The signal was always there, broadcasting constantly. You just needed to align yourself with it and stay aligned. I want to share with you one of the most profound truths I've discovered in my years of studying this law. Your assumption doesn't just create your future, it reorganizes your past. The meaning you give to past events is entirely dependent on your current assumptions about yourself. A woman once told me about a difficult childhood filled with hardship. For years, she carried that past as a burden, as evidence of her unworthiness. But when she changed her assumption about herself, when she began to assume she was worthy of love and success, her entire relationship to her past transformed. Those same difficult experiences became the foundation of her strength, the source of her compassion, the training ground for her resilience. The facts didn't change, but their meaning completely transformed. This is the creative power of assumption working backward through time itself. Now let me share with you something remarkable that I've witnessed countless times, a principle that seems almost magical until you understand the mechanism behind it. When you truly change your assumption about your past, when you genuinely revise your interpretation of what happened, something extraordinary occurs in your present life. People who were involved in those past events begin to behave differently toward you, not because you told them anything, not because circumstances forced their hand, but because your consciousness has shifted, and consciousness is the only reality. I remember a businessman who came to me with a problem that had haunted him for years. His father had passed away when he was young, and he carried a deep resentment that his father had never expressed love or approval toward him. This assumption colored everything: his relationships, his business dealings, his entire sense of self-worth. He operated from a place of needing to prove himself because he assumed he had never been good enough in his father's eyes. I asked him to do something that seemed impossible at first. Every night before sleep, I instructed him to revise those memories, to recall specific moments with his father and imagine them differently, not to deny what happened, but to assume a different meaning, a different emotional tone, to imagine his father's gruff silence was actually awkward love, to reinterpret his father's high standards as belief in his potential rather than criticism of his inadequacy. He practiced this faithfully for several weeks. Then something remarkable happened. His elderly uncle, his father's brother, called him out of the blue something that hadn't happened in years. During their conversation, the uncle spontaneously began sharing stories about his father, how his father used to boast about him to others, how proud he was, but didn't know how to express it, how he would sit at the kitchen table after the boy was asleep, looking at his school papers with tears of pride in his eyes. The facts had always been there. The love had always existed. But until he changed his assumption, until he revised his interpretation, those facts remained hidden from his experience. His new assumption about the past literally called forth evidence to confirm itself. This is not coincidence. This is law. And so we come to what I call the final frontier of this understanding: not just changing your future, not just revising your past, but recognizing the profound truth that you are doing both simultaneously in every moment of consciousness. There is no past sitting somewhere in a vault, unchangeable and fixed. There is no future rushing toward you on predetermined tracks. There is only now, this eternal now, and the assumption you hold within it. Every time you revise a memory, you are not playing a mental trick. You are not engaging in positive thinking or wishful fantasy. You are literally selecting which version of the past becomes the foundation for your present reality. And that present reality, held as assumption, becomes the bridge to your future. I once knew a woman who had struggled for years with the belief that she had wasted her youth. She looked back on her 20s and saw nothing but mistakes, poor choices, relationships that failed, opportunities missed. This assumption colored everything in her present: her confidence, her relationships, her willingness to try new things. When she learned the principle of revision, she began systematically rewriting those years in her imagination. Not by denying what had happened, but by reinterpreting it. She saw herself learning valuable lessons. She saw herself building strength through challenges. She saw herself making the best choices she could with the awareness she had at the time. Within months, her entire demeanor changed. She carried herself differently. She spoke with authority about her experience. And the most remarkable thing, people from her past began reaching out, sharing memories that confirmed this new interpretation. Her reality had literally reorganized itself around her revised assumption. This is the power that lives within you right now. Not tomorrow, not when you become more spiritual or more evolved. Right now, in this moment, you have the ability to stand as God stands, selecting, assuming, and thereby creating your experience of reality. And this is what separates those who transform their lives from those who merely study spiritual concepts. It's not more knowledge you need. It's not another book, another seminar, another teacher. What you need is the courage to stand in your authority and declare, I am what I desire to be. When you say, I am wealthy, you're not lying to yourself. You're not pretending. You're selecting from the infinite field of possibilities the version of reality where wealth is your natural state. You're collapsing the wave function of potential into the particle of experience. The universe doesn't argue with your I am statements. It doesn't say, let me check your bank account first. It doesn't say, let me see if you're worthy. It simply responds to the frequency you're broadcasting. And your I am declarations are the most powerful frequency you can emit. This is why changing your self-concept changes everything. Your self-concept is nothing more than the collection of beliefs you hold about who you are. And those beliefs are simply I am statements you've repeated so many times they've become invisible to you. I am someone who struggles with money. I am not good at relationships. I am prone to illness. These aren't facts about you. They're selections you've made, assumptions you've accepted, states you've occupied so consistently they feel like identity. But here's the beautiful truth. You can change them in an instant, not through years of therapy or decades of meditation, through decision, through the radical act of selecting a new assumption and refusing to return to the old one. When you catch yourself about to say, I am anxious, you pause. You recognize that you're about to select and solidify a state, and instead you consciously choose, I am peaceful. I am calm. I am centered in divine presence. This isn't positive thinking. This is ontological selection. You're not painting over a negative reality with positive words. You're choosing which reality to occupy, which version of yourself to animate, which frequency to broadcast into the quantum field that responds to your every assumption. And here's what most people never grasp. The quantum field doesn't judge your selections. It doesn't ask if you're worthy. It doesn't require credentials or proof or a certain bank balance before it responds. It simply mirrors back whatever frequency you're consistently broadcasting. You walk into a room feeling invisible. The field arranges circumstances that confirm your invisibility. You walk into the same room feeling magnetic. The field rearranges the entire energetic architecture to reflect that magnetism back to you. This isn't mysticism, this is mechanics. Every assumption you hold is a gravitational force, pulling matching circumstances toward you with mathematical precision. And most people are walking around broadcasting frequencies they're not even aware of, wondering why their results never change. They say they want abundance while broadcasting lack. They say they want love while broadcasting unworthiness. They say they want success while broadcasting the frequency of someone who's perpetually striving but never arriving. And the field, indifferent and utterly faithful, simply responds, your wish is my command. So let me ask you directly, what frequency are you broadcasting right now, in this very moment, about the thing you most desire? Not what you hope for, not what you're trying to attract. What are you assuming to be true about it? Because that assumption, that subtle energetic signature beneath your conscious thoughts, is what's actually creating your experience. If you're assuming it's hard, you'll experience difficulty. If you're assuming it's not for people like me, you'll experience exclusion. If you're assuming I have to fight for every inch, you'll experience resistance at every turn. But if you're assuming it's already mine, if you're assuming the universe is conspiring in my favor, if you're assuming I am the type of person this naturally happens to, then watch how quickly your external world reconfigures itself to match that inner knowing. This is the level of mastery I'm inviting you into. Not the mastery of doing more, but the mastery of being more deliberately. The mastery of selecting your inner reality with such clarity and consistency that the outer reality has no choice but to conform.